Hello, good day. Hey, this is Ben with Studio on the Lake. This is an interim that I had to recreate. Many years ago, I did a small cuckoo for the wife. She had it in her German Schrank, which is a display case, a curio buffet, I guess, a bit lack of better reference. I not supposed to be in there. I took it out and used it as a pattern here to 3, 4 months ago, and she noticed it was missing, and I'm just making the assumption that it was sitting beside my chair out in the studio and disappeared in the fire. So she ordered another one, and here it is finished. It's going to be about probably 2 videos on this. But there's Baby Cuckoo in the style that she likes. Kind of got a little bit of an angry, grumpy look, and it's fun. You know, I like doing these small birds, and it seems like you guys like to see them. So it will get no paint, and that's just the burn marks on him there. So sit back and enjoy the ride. The start of this thing, of course, is just like always. It's a piece of basswood, and I didn't have the bandsaw. Here's the pattern I've used for years for cuckoos. This is a really early cuckoo, and he was in the fire, but he managed to make it through. So he sits there as a pattern. I never really did much with him. He's pretty simple. One of my early birds. And I'm just using him to get the general layout on the basswood. So when the bandsaw arrives, well, the bandsaw's here. I just have to not be in Iowa. I need to be in Wisconsin. And then I would have probably trimmed this out a little bit further. And you can see how I use that one for a pattern in the background. So I'm putting the head in. I want the head to be turned slightly to the side. I've seen folks cut a bird out in a straight flat plane, 2-dimensional, and then they'll cut the head off and turn the head. I guess you can do that if you want, but it's a lot more fun to take a block like this and sculpture it down. These little birds, if you've never tried them, if you're a power carver or any kind of carver actually, with small hand tools and knives and that sort of thing, they're fun to do because you're taking a block and then you kind of sculpt it down. And the secret to this, obviously, in addition to doing 1,000 of them, is to just take small bites and turn it all around in your hand, and then redraw your reference lines. So the interesting story while you're watching this boring stuff, I left a lot of the stuff in here. Normally, a lot of this I'll run 2 times the speed, and that is a saber burr in the power carver there. That's that's an Elite Oz Elite power carver, very similar to the Oz Plus 2. They're a little pricey. I'm kind of liking this one, but it does have a tendency to get a little warm as I go through. And my old handpieces did not get warm, no matter how long I pushed them. So I guess I'll have to get used to that since my old ones are no longer available. But and then you can see me coming back with a knife and sculpting. But I left a lot of this material in here, and this one is going to end right after I put the eyes in. And you can see that at that point you could almost quit what you were doing. So, fun story. The Schrank, which is German for a buffet or a china cabinet. When we were young, we still only had 2 kids, not 4, middle 80s in Germany. Our neighbors, Rudy and Efi, were an older couple, probably 65, 70, and they were planning for retirement. So they heated their house with wood. And they were interesting characters. We lived in a little small town called Bootsbachhausen, and all the older children had grown up and moved away from the town, and all that was left was an elderly community. A little small town, maybe 200, 300 people. But we rented a house there, or an apartment there, and our next door neighbors was Rudy and Efi. They had a daughter our age, used to hang out, and they would invite us over to their house to play with the kids, and tell us stories. They didn't speak English, so we had to use our German. But Rudy, over the course of the 3 years we lived there, decided he was going to stack all of his inner courtyard with firewood, and that myself and a gentleman named John downstairs, and also military, would be good free labor to help him out, and then they would put a barbecue together or something. So he'd come get you at like 6 o'clock in the morning and get John and I, have the tractor all ready to go, logs already felled in the woods and marked in the German system, and then we'd go out to get the logs and bring them back. The inside of their courtyard, German houses, you're looking at the back of the house from the street, and it'll have an RV-sized gate and then a little door. You open that gate and go inside, and then the back is, and the interior is a courtyard, and just beautiful. Their courtyard was done in probably the 1700s. It was like a Roman interior with a pond, a 15 by 30 foot pond in the center, and it was just cool, interesting. But it was all run down, and the little slats in the Roman courtyard part were little rooms, 10 by 12, give or take, and they were filled with stuff. Inside one of these was this German Schrank that they gave us from the 20s or the early 30s, and we've had it ever since. It even had the glass front in it, and we've managed over the last 35, 40 years not to even break the glass. But inside that trunk is where my wife keeps her stuff that she keeps or takes from me. She likes a carving, she takes it and puts it in there. So I'm not supposed to be in there, but occasionally I need something out of there for a pattern, and that's how this cuckoo came about. Rudy was kind of fun because you'd go out and you'd load 8-foot logs, basically a foot in diameter, and he'd bring them back and split them with a saw, but we'd help him unload them. Well, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. He'd stop on one load, get ready to do the second load, and with John and I, and he'd pull out a beer rack that had beer bottles with corks in the top of them, and inside that was homemade schnapps from Hungary, which is where they were from. And he would pour 4 or 5, I kid you not, schnapps runs of different from different relatives, and then we'd jump on the wagon and go 2 kilometers down the road and load more, and then repeat the whole process an hour, 2 hours later. So by noon we were done working and going and getting the family and doing a barbecue for the rest of the day, and then by 2 or 3 o'clock, of course, we had to go take a nap. So just a side story there. This guy is looking really good, and the difference between the cuckoo and some of the other baby birds is the cuckoo wings on this one are tilted up. His beak is a little bit wider. If you know anything about cuckoo birds, they're not a particularly nice bird. The only redeeming factor is that they have the cuckoo sound, and they're kind of like the Nelson bird, the hee-haw that you see in the Midwest here. But down in Bavaria, the cuckoos are quite prevalent. They're a bigger bird. They're a parasite. They don't raise their own young. What they'll do is they'll find any nest available, and then they'll put lay their egg, or 1 or 2 eggs, usually just one, inside the nest. And these eggs, if you look them up, will be cuckoo eggs will be 2 or 3 times the size of the other birds' eggs. Well, birds, I guess, are not that smart, so they incubate the cuckoo egg along with their chicks, or their eggs, and then the birds hatch out. And in a lot of cases, the cuckoo outcompetes their young, and they end up starving, and the only one that gets raised out of that is a cuckoo. So that's a pretty good racket, I guess. If you're a cuckoo mom and dad bird, you can go about your business, and you don't have to worry about someone raising the young birds. So based on that, they're not a particularly nice bird. They're considered in a lot of cases a parasite for the way. But of course, the Germans built cuckoo clocks down in Bavaria, and they became famous. So that's a case of misinformation. Had they figured out early on, or people knew early on what cuckoos were all about, how parasitic they were, short of the call, they probably wouldn't be nearly as popular as they are today. So what you see I've got in the power carver there, that's one of those ruby bits. And I'm at the point where I've got the rough shape, as you saw just a few minutes ago, looking at that thing around. And now I'm trying to refine and taking just small pieces off this. I turn it all around, I redraw my center lines, and I try to keep everything symmetrical. There's a point where I leave enough material on the front to do the beak. And if you're doing birds or just starting birds, one of the things you will do is you will leave way too much out there on the beak, or you won't leave enough, and you won't be able to get a beak out of it. But you'd be surprised how small a lot of the beaks on these birds truly are in relationship to their head. So like any carving that you're doing, you want to turn it around and around. I've talked about this before. If you're not subscribed, that would certainly help the channel out. Get the subscription rate up there, and if you like this sort of thing. And if not, that's fine too. But you can go look down in my links down there. You got a lot of people. You got Jordy Johnson over at Carving Fusion, and Jordy's a great character, part of our community. You got Just Carve Rob. You got Mark Hall out there. You should definitely go over and check out Mike at Stennet Sticks, and those sort of folks. And then the new folks that are coming in, Uncle Kevin, and he's a friend of Ryan Cook. And Ryan Cook, if you're into the chainsaw carving, we don't differentiate in the community here between the true carving and the chainsaw work. And then you got a new guy out in Australia, Matt, or in New Zealand, I guess, which would be a different sport. If you've seen all of the interesting fantasy films, The Hobbit and that sort of stuff, they were all filmed in New Zealand because of the spectacular mountains and that sort of thing. So I kind of envy Matt, and from Matt Carves. He says him and his wife live in Christchurch. So check Matt out. Give him a subscribe. He's somewhere in the 600 or 700 range last time I looked, and we'll see if we can get him over 1,000, so he can start picking up a little bit of pocket change from these ads. You don't get rich on YouTube for sure, unless you've got millions and millions of views. And so far that hasn't happened, but that's not the goal to this. The goal to this is to just show how this is done and put this together. So I'm starting to set up the eye socket, and I kind of want this guy to have a little bit of an attitude. Well, how you do an attitude is just like how you do it with a person. You furrow the brows and you stick them a little bit closer together, and all of a sudden they've got a bad attitude. There is I don't know if I probably did, I don't remember if I did it or not, but years ago I copied the Mad Bluebird craze, and the Mad Bluebird had this, the eyelids or above the eye, and they were furrowed together, and he just looked, sitting on a post, just looked pissed off. And of course, when birds get cold, they tend to fluff their feathers out to put a little insulation into it. So this bluebird, the Mad Bluebird, look it up if you haven't seen that. The Mad Bluebird is sitting there all puffed up, and he's got his eyebrows furrowed, and he just looks twisted, like his life is not going well. So this one, it was finished. I gave it to the wife, and she liked it. And of course, it doesn't replace the original. I remember the original bird. It was one of the first ones that I did in a series, and I really think this one was a lot better than that bird. But what do I know? A lot of times, Jordy did a couple carvings here a couple weeks ago, and he didn't like them. And I actually really liked them. Well, the moral of the story, when carving this stuff, I've noticed over the years, and even when we had a shop when I was stationed at West Point in Cold Springs across the river, a little tourist town, the things that I particularly like are the carvings that I liked. I still have a lot of those. They didn't sell, and they haven't sold over the years. Part of that might be because I priced them a little too high with the intent that, so if you want to buy it, you have to pay for it. But that's not necessarily the case. Other carvings that I finished really quickly for the shop and made compromises and that sort of thing, and I just thought looked like crap, immediately sold. So you never know what's going to appeal to one person. What I see in these, even when I'm looking at this bird as it is right here, I like the looks of the face on this guy, but other people may see things in there that I don't and interpret it different. And thus we have, obviously, art. And here's a couple of glass eyes. These are Tohican glass eyes. I did get my order in, and I'll be adding to those along. These are 5 millimeter light brown or straw brown. I forget. I think they're $2.99 or $3.99 a set for the pair. These don't have the wire. If you're interested in purchasing these, go to Tohican Glass Eyes, and you're going to get confused. So look at the different prices. But I think these are 110s, numerical 110s, and I'd have to look. So if you're going to buy some glass eyes and they're not making sense to you, just shoot me an email either at Studio on the Lake 88. Add the 88 to the back of Studio on the Lake, gmail.com. Or you can leave a comment in this video or any of the other videos, and typically I catch those and will respond, and I'll enlighten you a little bit more on the glass eyes. I think the glass eyes make them come to life, for sure. So this is a finer taper ruby bit. And now that I've got the eyes in there, I cut that eye socket just a hair bigger than the eye itself. And how I do that is I pick the burr that I'm using, and I want just a millimeter or two around that eye, just enough room for the quick wood that I'm going to set these eyes with to come out. Now, I'm setting that eye socket down in there. If you look at a bird, he's got an eye channel down through there. If you look at any decoy carvings, and the eye channel in a bird typically goes in line with the middle of the beak or slightly above the top of the beak. And this is where a reference would come in. I'm not using a reference other than, actually I've kind of given up on the reference at this point because I used that reference bird initially to get the shape, and here I'm just going with what looks good to me, and you can see that I'm kind of tapering down where I'm going to put the feathers later on, and you're going to see that in the second video. So the number of videos I've got in the background here still going. Obviously I could do some more on the first chainsaw, the gnome head. I've got a lot of material on that. I have a funny little umbrella thing that's it's gonna be I'll put that up I did for a grandkid. And then I've got, here's that quick wood that you can buy anywhere now, and there's the bird sitting in the background. So I've got a sign that I did, which is kind of a flat relief carving, and I'll get that edited. So I'm counting in the back of my head probably, for sure 2 videos, 3 videos. I do have the rest of this one, but I haven't edited it, so that'll be part 2. So 3 or 4 videos in the next 4 or 5 days, if I get motivated. Will be coming your way or being put up on the channel. So that little bird almost looks done in the background. I haven't done any feather texturing. He's just got the shape put together, and I'll do that in the second one. What you saw there on that wide shot, that's how this part right here too, this is how I normally shoot. The camera sits over, it's a Canon 70D, sits over my left shoulder, canted down so I don't have my mug into it, and I shoot this far away, and I try to stay in the center of the frame. In a second here, I'm going to show you where I pop in. Okay, so there's the same shot, but I zoomed in on the editing software, and you can see in a lot of cases The focus and the pixels are good enough, and there's the wider version. The focus and the pixels are good enough that I can get in there really close and tight on the editing if I want to. That makes it a lot easier to shoot when I shoot wide angle, because if I get out of frame, it's hard to get out of frame, as you can see. I might do Jordy, go over to Jordy Johnson. Jordy picked out my first carving, and I kind of deserve that because I took one of his videos and did a voiceover here, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. And then he did a voiceover on mine, which is kind of funny. So you should go over and check that out. I'm tempted to do something back, but I think I'll leave it alone. That was payback for one that I did a while back. And as those of you that are subscribed know that him and I and Rob and Just Carve Rob occasionally get to screwing around. I think it's more in the winter than in the summer. Summer's kind of a hard time because I'm tending the garden. We're flying quite a bit. People seem to hurt and damage themselves in the summer more so than the winter. And I've got stuff that I can do outside, and competition for the time. The grandkids come up to the lake, and of course they have to fish or shoot slingshots or bow and arrows. And speaking of, the kid brought a slingshot that he bought at a tourist trap, and it's really kind of cool. I think I'm gonna carve one. I just have to get the tubing. So here's the eyes going in. The knife I have there is one that has a handle on it, and I made that 15 years ago. It did go through the fire, if you follow all the stuff. But I use it for setting the eyes, and I trim the back of the knife. And you see I push that in. That quickwood squeezes out around the eye. And in this case, I'm taking it all off. There's a point on some of the duck decoys, and especially on that raven or that crow that I'm getting ready to do, where I will probably put an eyelid in with this stuff. So you can sculpt this quickwood as long as you're going to paint. It doesn't burn so well, and I'm going to leave this guy, unpainted with just the burn marks, which you'll get in the second video. So typically towards the end, once I get it all cleaned off, I will push the eye in just a hair more. And you can see how you could sculpt that into eyelids and lashes and that sort of thing. In this case, I'm taking it all off. And once again, that is shot at a lot wider angle. And I try to stay in the center. And then when I edit it, I'll zoom it down. And sometimes I can catch it, sometimes not. But you could sand him up. If this character... I remember it's going to focus in just a second here, and that's why I got my fat hand in there. I like the look of him. I like where he's going, and he's got a good shape. Right now he has no feathers. The wings are not complete. You can see the back of him, but you can tell what's happening here. So that's where we're going to leave this one. I hope you liked it. This has been Ben with Studio on the Lake.